I'm joined by Miguel Tinker Salas from Claremont, California by Skype. He's a professor of Latin American history at Pomona College. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I want to begin by asking you to comment on the latest in Venezuela. We know there is this arrest of a Supreme Court justice appointed by the National Assembly and others in hiding. Opposition is calling for more protests. Where are things headed?
Well, I think that both sides are really engaged in a process of brinksmanship. They don't have a solution to how to wind this down. For over 100 days, we've seen protest after protest. Maduro has not been deposed, so they have not managed what they wanted. They held a plebiscite last week. Maduro is scheduled to hold the constitutional election this next Sunday. They're both at loggerheads. They don't have a response. They keep ratcheting up the pressure. They keep increasing the rhetoric. And unfortunately, it's the country who suffers the consequences of these constant protests that disrupt daily life, disrupt economic activity. On the question of the Supreme Court justices, there is no way that an existing government is going to allow a parallel government to exist. The National Assembly knew that, and the result has been expected.
But how long do you think this can continue? It looks like now is a test on both sides for their endurance.
It's a test of wills, but again, I firmly believe that the loser in the large measure is the people of Venezuela. The really issue here is that we need to hear proposals from Maduro and from the opposition on how to resolve the economic crisis, how to resolve the inflation, how to resolve the multiple exchange rates, how to deal with crime, how to deal with scarcity. Those are the real fundamental issues that the majority of Venezuelans would like to see resolved. They want to see improvements in their daily life, not the continued protests that prevent their daily movement and their daily activities.
Well, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the opposition for a second. We know that to call for a regime change, for Maduro to go, is always easy, but what comes afterwards? I mean, what about the rebuilding of a competent government that can fix its economy and the institutions that can preserve social cohesion in Venezuela?
It's not clear that this opposition has a plan for that. In many cases, by closing ranks, by simply opposing Maduro, they don't have to address the very hard issues that anybody else would have to confront. Getting rid of Maduro tomorrow is not going to resolve the economic problems of Venezuela, the social problems, the cultural problems. They are not going to be resolved by simply Maduro disappearing. It's not that simple. These are structural problems. They are deep-rooted problems. And in fact, for the opposition to keep simply ratcheting up the pressure permits them not to have to address the fundamental economic and social problems. And it's unfortunate because what the country needs is dialogue. The country needs dialogue, conversation, the ability to come together and to try to find a solution and a mediated solution to the current crisis.
Well, the United States has weighed in. It is saying that it is considering sanctions equivalent to the same put on Iran. Will you see repercussions on the ground, or will Maduro be able to avoid this kind of punishment?
We hope that they do not impose sanctions because sanctions would be against the population of Venezuela. There's already scarcities in terms of food and medicine. If the U.S. imposed sanctions against the economy or against Venezuelan oil, it would only aggravate those. It would not affect Maduro directly. It would affect the Venezuelan population directly. So one can only hope that there are cooler heads in Washington and they do not impose sanctions. Those sanctions did not work in Iran. They did not work in Cuba, and they won't work in Venezuela except to increase the pain and suffering of the Venezuelan population.
Who can be the mediators of peace other than the forces inside Venezuela, Professor? We know Colombia is a stakeholder, refugees going there, and also other Latin American countries.
We've seen in the case of Leopoldo Lopez, who was released from prison and given house arrest, that Zapatero, the ex-president Prime Minister of Spain, played a decisive role. There are other countries that accompanied him. Torrijos from Panama, Fernandez from the Dominican Republic. The Vatican could play that role. UNASUR, the Union of South American Nations, could play that role. There are many, but again, in the heated context of Venezuela, some in the opposition consider dialogue or discussing with the government to be treason, so they will not participate. And that's unfortunate. The government has also, on its part, not fulfilled some of the responsibilities they took on from the dialogue. They also must be held accountable. But we have to try at least to bring together a dialogue that would try to bring this violence to an end and prevent what could become a civil war in Venezuela.